the cornfield calm, Midwest tone, but he's spitting facts like a dog with a bone. Lanky frame, fire-haired eyes on the case, breaking down the game in the darkest place. Sports scores to murder boards, Hoosier logic cuts like swords. From Friday lights to chalked out lines, this redhead's brain rewrites the lines inside the Hoosier mind, where the stories twist and stats unwind. He's a legend in flannel, mic in hand, digging deep where few can stand. From touchdowns to crime scenes raw, he's got the truth in every draw. Yeah, step in if you dare to find what's brewing inside the Hoosier mind. He'll talk Pacers, Colts, or Colts on trial. Hoosier humor with a devilish smile. He's that redhead sleuth with a box of clues. Takes your headline, breaks the news. With every stat and every scream, he's painting portraits in your stream. Don't blink, he'll tie it tight. From game night wins to murder fight. Inside the Hoosier mind, where the facts hit hard and the lines are blind. He's a ginger ninja, sleuth and slick, cracking cases play by play quick. From courtrooms to the hardwood floor, he digs for more than just the score. Tune in and don't rewind, you're deep now inside the Hoosier mind.
There we go. Hope if I'm not muted. What's up, everyone? Welcome into Inside the Hoosier Mind, brought to you by Military Broadcast Radio, helping give veterans a voice, as well as Gunfighter Beard Company, a Marine vet out of South Carolina who makes all homemade beard care products, everything to make your beard look and smell good. Definitely check him out at gunfighterbeardco.com. So we are deep into the off season. We're deep into the off season for both the NFL and college football. And if you have followed the show at all, the last few weeks, we've actually talked a couple of times about the Brendan Sorsby situation. That's actually what Joe and I talked about last week. And then, of course, in true college football fashion, we have a massive update about it, and that's actually what today's episode is going to be about. We're going to talk about Brendan Sorsby's update as far as him not playing college football, him deciding to forego that, go into the NFL supplemental draft. And then, because I didn't do one last week, I am going to continue on the College Football for Dummies series. I'm going to actually do 2 episodes, so it's going to be episodes 2 and 3 in this one, where I'm going to cover defense and special teams. I even have some visual presentations to add in on this one. Didn't do it for the special teams part, but I do have it for the defense. It's going to be hopefully a lot of fun. And then in a couple of episodes, maybe even the next episode, we'll see how this goes, see how my mind ends up planning everything out. We're going to go into the actual specific college football conferences themselves, kind of the history of them, where the teams come from, who has recently moved into the conference, who's original founding member, some of the historic rivalries and whatnot, both in the conference and outside of the conference, et cetera, et cetera. So still going to be a lot of fun as we go into deep here into the offseason of college football. But let's dive into the first big thing as far as the Brendan Sorsby update. So it was actually announced yesterday evening that Brendan Sorsby will not be playing college football for Texas Tech this fall, that he is going to go ahead and forego his eligibility, even though he did get he did receive an injunction that would allow him to potentially play this year in 2026. Now, for anybody who doesn't know, if maybe you're catching up or kind of new to this, or if maybe you've just caught tidbits of it, Brendan Sorsby is a college football quarterback who he originally started on the Indiana Hoosiers as a redshirt freshman. He was like way deep down on the depth chart. He didn't really see any playing time. Bet on his own team as far as through legal gambling apps and whatnot. Bet while he was at Indiana. He ended up transferring to Cincinnati, ended up becoming the starter there at Cincinnati for a couple of seasons. Was betting while he was at Cincinnati. Hit the transfer portal this past spring. Texas Tech went all in on him. He was considered one of the top quarterbacks of the transfer portal this past offseason. And Texas Tech paid him $5 million to potentially be their starting quarterback to hopefully lead them into hopefully what they would believe would be a deep playoff run and a potential national championship. And before he even got to play a true meaningful snap in this, there was somebody who decided to be a whistleblower and reported him for the fact that he had been gambling. He did self-check himself into a rehab facility in Arizona for about 30 to 45 days. Got some of the help that he needed, but as a result, the NCAA immediately suspended him for that because the NCAA rules, you are not allowed to gamble on football. You're not allowed to gamble on basketball, either collegiate or professional, either or. Same with baseball. And apparently he was doing it for football games. He was even doing it in football games that he wasn't necessarily playing in, but his teammates and the team that he was on was playing in. And that's a huge no-no for the NCAA. And as a result, there is a huge amount of backlash for the injunction that he finally ended up getting from a local Texas judge who did grant him the injunction. And there is a whole lot of debate and argument as to the legitimacy behind that. Of the injunction had to cause irreparable harm to himself, to basically his career, etc. And the argument was he's not going to be able to be coached by some of the best coaches. He's not going to have access to some of the best trainers. He's not going to have access to some of the best facilities, etc., because he would essentially be removed from the team had the ban from the NCAA gone through, and the injunction stops that. Well, because the injunction was able to go through, Texas Tech now found itself in a huge pot of absolutely boiling water. And there's a whole lot of backlash. There's backlash from other conferences saying that they were going to potentially cancel all future sporting events, football or non-football related, with Texas Tech. There was even issues within the Big 12 of the entire conference going after Texas Tech, even some of the conference teams saying that they didn't want to play Texas Tech at all. Even as soon as this upcoming season, they didn't want to play. Texas Tech was fully prepared to go to bat for that and fully prepared to tackle that issue should it arise, by basically saying, hey, if you do, we're more than going to take the legal route in this and go into court. And all of this being said, all of it ends up kind of going for naught because Brendan Sorsby decides to kind of forego that and decides to go into the supplemental draft. So I do want to kind of look at it from a few different perspectives and a few different ways of what I think has happened, because there's not really been a say as to why. It's just been a lot of speculation as to their thinking of, okay, this is probably why he decided to not even continue this fight and just go ahead and do the NFL supplemental draft. So obviously one of the big situations is because he got the injunction, technically for about the span of a week or two there, he was eligible to play. Now the problem is this is in the beginning to middle of June. The season doesn't start until the end of August. So they've got all summer that they would potentially have to contend with this. The NCAA immediately had an appeal basically typed up, ready to go. All they had to do was hit submit for the time that they figured out what the injunction was going to be. Once they figured out the injunction was going to be in favor of Sorsby, they immediately filed the appeal the same day, and they wanted it expedited to potentially get this review, to get this seen so that they can have the injunction basically appealed and overruled and or thrown out. Now, the other situation on top of that is all of these teams, all of these conferences, even these other teams within the conference going after Texas Tech as a result. Here's where, to me, Texas Tech does get a kind of a unfair rep. Is Texas Tech is doing basically what any other Power 4 team would do for a star student athlete. And I know some people, they're not necessarily a huge fan of Brendan Sorsby. They don't understand why college football has basically been turned upside down for this one guy who he wasn't exactly turning heads at Cincinnati. Like, he was good for the team that he was at Cincinnati, for the talent level that he had, for what he was able to do. He was solid. Now, would that have been different on a significantly better Texas Tech team that has spent a ton of money as far as NIL goes, that has done better as far as NIL with recruiting and the transfer portal both? Absolutely. I think Brendan Sorsby would have been tremendously better had he truly had the opportunity to play. Um, the really bad part, though, is because Texas Tech decided to double down and defend their star athlete. People are now, criticizing them. Why are you letting a kid play that is potentially compromising the integrity of the game? And there is a part of me that completely understands that. Um, because at the end of the day, the integrity of the game is really pretty much the only thing a team has. Like, it is truly the only thing that, whether your team is good, whether your team is bad, in the middle, indifferent, whichever the case may be, everybody always has the integrity of the game, that we are playing the game to our utmost abilities with the best competition, with our best heart, 150% effort. We're doing this day in and day out during football season, in the off season, etc. We are doing this legitimate, by the books. None of it is faked. None of it is rigged or anything like that. And so with them, backing him up doing that, it then puts a lot of things into question of, oh, well, did Texas Tech lose this because he made a bet? Did he offer to potentially, pay out a, other team's quarterback or other team's defense, or, does he pay them off if they end up getting a win or if the other team takes a fall? So there's a lot that goes into it as far as, okay, well, there's some really bad negativity and irreparable harm back here. On the other end, though, for Texas Tech, to me, is where they're caught between a rock and a hard place, because they're a Power 4 team that made the playoffs, that has made a big push, and there's even talks of them suspending Texas Tech from even making the Big 12 the conference championship game. Should they, go on that run and they still play Sorsby? Because of that, and because of the question of the integrity, they can't sit here and then not defending. Because if you're a Power 4 conference like that, and if this guy is and if this person, this human being, is truly a part of your team and a part of your community, you're going to do what you can to help him. And I feel for Texas Tech, because had they not, all of the criticism, oh, why didn't you help this young man? Why didn't you give this man the help that he needed? He has an addiction. He has a problem. And now, whether or not you agree or you disagree or you like or don't like Brendan Sorsby, at the end of the day, he did have a legitimate problem. It was an upward of like over 4,000 bets, and he bet over $90,000 within a span of like 4 to 5 years. He had a problem as far as when it comes to betting. So, that's really not a question. But it does lead to the question of, what does this do for college football moving forward? And what does it do for, teams like Texas Tech? What does it do for the Big 12 conference as a whole? Because now you're really, pushing the pedal to the metal as far as, we need to ramp up having a better governing system over college football. There's some arguments that they might want to try to do self-governing. So basically, like Brett Yormark, who is the commissioner for the Big 12, if all the conglomerate universities of the Big 12 come together and say, hey, you can dictate what we can and can't do, or you'll basically have the final say, like all of us will put in a vote and then you make the ultimate decision. We're just going to govern ourselves. There's arguments that could be really good. There's arguments that could be really bad. And part of it is because while Brett Yormark is going to be looking out for the best interest of the entire conference, it may also come out to be one of those, like, you just simply get outvoted or outnumbered. The only two teams that basically weren't completely on board with boycotting Texas Tech as far as playing them was BYU and UCF. It's like, okay, well, 14 to, well, technically 13 to 2, when it comes to that, excluding Texas Tech. it's like, majority kind of rules in that, but maybe it's something that's, maybe even more split. If there's 16 teams, say it's 8-8 or it's 9-7, like, yeah, well, the nines just barely have it, and Brett has to go with that. So there's a little bit of a danger there when it comes to little self governance. But then, of course, the other argument of who is going to be the overall governing body that oversees college football. The NCAA, we all know, or if you don't know, the NCAA is basically losing power every single day. And where the NCAA truly loses power is in these individual state battles and in these individual court cases that we've basically seen run rampant now for the last few years. Not even something just as major as gambling, just a lot of it eligibility. Sometimes they count junior college years, sometimes they don't. They've been a little bit more stringent here of lately as far as some of the eligibility rules for how long you can be in college football. I don't know if anybody remembers, there was a tight end at Miami a couple of years ago. He'd been in college football for like 9 years. Like, he played with Justin Herbert. He played with Bo Nix at Oregon. Like, he played with so many quarterbacks. He's in his 30s and still in college football, still playing. And I think he was already working on like a doctorate degree at that point. So they've been weird with some of their eligibility and whatnot. And so that's where we see a lot of the NCAA lose some of these court cases and some of these battles. And that's why it's like, the NCAA doesn't really have any teeth, because some state judge is going to fight it, and then it's just got to go through a legal court system. Let's see. Mike Shara DuPont, is that right? Hi, appreciate you tuning in. So it's a weird situation. But it does make me wonder then, because it also opens the Pandora's box of now, basically for any of these student athletes. Obviously, there are a few massive exceptions if you break the actual law, depending on how much and how far the state, and depending on the severity of it, even federal courts want to pursue it. You can almost get away with anything. Look at Brendan Sorsby, breaking the number one rule of, don't. And it's not that you can't gamble, it's you can't bet on the game. You can't bet on yourself, because you have access to insider information. You're privy to, hey, maybe this guy did really well, really well in practice. Maybe this guy just looked absolutely fired up and is absolutely, clicking on all cylinders in practice or warm-ups. Like, it's a weird tiptoe that you have to try to balance. But the fact that basically any of these guys and kids, they have a problem. Okay, well, I'm going to go find a judge somewhere that's going to make this happen. So it will be really interesting to see. I do wonder too if this was mutual through both parties between Texas Tech and Sorsby. I also wonder, was this more of a kind of a test, and maybe like putting what I would call feelers out of, Brendan says, okay, I messed up. Everybody's not happy with me. All the writing on the wall says I'm not going to be able to play. Like, let me see what happens if I put in an injunction. Are people going to be happy? Are people going to be mad? What's their reaction going to be? Then he sees, the consequences to that, all the conferences coming out that are, livid, all the other teams that are like, we're canceling games and series with Texas Tech. And I even brought it up last episode with Joe of, if let's say I'm a Texas Tech softball player and I'm a freshman coming in, or if I even hit the transfer portal and went to like the Texas Tech softball team, why am I being punished? And why are other teams like, yeah, we don't want to play you Texas Tech in softball because of what a football player done on the men's side? Wait a minute. Wait a minute. Why am I getting punished for what some other dude did that I don't have anything to do with? And the only thing we share is the fact that we go to the same university, have the same mascot name, but I'm getting punished for what he did. No. So that to me is, I think, one of the feelers that I think they maybe have put out to see what the general reaction would be. And then once all the court cases started to come in, once the threat of the Texas Attorney General saying we'll sue anybody who doesn't want to play, and then basically the Oklahoma Attorney General as well as the Kansas Attorney General both said, "Bring it. We'll more than happily meet you in court." I think that was kind of the final straw of we might need to think about this. And then the Big 12 itself as a conference, basically all 15 other teams were fully prepared to go into that legal battle against Texas Tech too. Um, so it is one of those. It's the epitome of the college football offseason because of all that drama, because of everything that goes into that. And then we're sitting here and it's like, well, nothing kind of changed. Like Brendan Sorsby's still not going to play. He's going to go into the supplemental draft. They're more than likely going to turn to the sophomore quarterback, Will Hammond, who I thought he filled in really well for him last year. He filled in for him in the Utah game. That was really big. He ended up absolutely having a great game, having to fill in for Brett Mayer last year, or Bear Meyer, one of whoever their quarterback was last year. He ended up getting hurt, or I think it's Bear Morton is one of those two. But he ended up getting hurt. Will Hammond comes in, does absolutely great, leads them in ultimately to a win. Now he's got another year under their system. He's got another year under his belt. He's got some experience. He's got some play time. Now there is still some question. It was obviously significant enough that they still felt we still think we need to upgrade the quarterback position. Let's do that via transfer portal, which is why they even went to go get Sorsby. But nonetheless, though, I think Texas Tech will still be okay. The schedule for them is really not daunting. They still have a pretty easy path for the Big 12 championship game, and more than likely even a playoff appearance. But they have to win. They absolutely have to win the Big 12 in order to get that, just because they don't play an extremely tough schedule. So this year they play Abilene Christian, probably going to win. They place Oregon State, probably going to win. Houston to open up Big 12 conference play. And then they have one more out of conference play. They play Sam Houston. That should also be a win. And then Colorado, Arizona State, Cincinnati, Arizona, West Virginia, Oklahoma State, Baylor, TCU. None of these teams that they are facing are technically ranked as it stands right now. Like absolutely none of them. What is that? Lisa Collins. Hi, Lisa. Appreciate you tuning in. And Amber and Alora from Into the Weeds. I see you too. Appreciate you stopping in. So Texas Tech kind of has a really cupcake schedule to walk into the Big 12 championship. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for Will Hammond to grow. I think there's a chance for him to maybe get some momentum and really, fight. But just with this schedule, had they tried to, keep Sorsby playing and then, be suspended from the Big 12 championship with that weak of a schedule, I don't think they would have been able to do it. I don't think that they would have been able to, I don't think they would have been able to make the argument of, yeah, we deserve to be in. I don't know about that there, man. I don't know about that one. But nonetheless, though, we'll move on from Brendan Sorsby. Like I said, that's an interesting development. Like I said, he's going to go to the supplemental draft. That's actually next week on the 22nd, so that's next Monday. And if anybody doesn't know what the NFL supplemental draft is, it doesn't happen very often. There's like 3 set conditions that have to happen for a player in order for them to come available in the supplemental draft. And basically he meets like one of the 3 criteria for it to happen. And basically teams have the chance. It's kind of like trading a pick. So let's say the Browns feel like he's worth a first-round pick. They can bid a future first-round pick for him. And if if nobody else wants to potentially bid that, or if they have a higher pick or bid that they want to throw out there, they can. And if not, oh well. So, and basically whoever is the highest bidder is the one who ends up getting a drafting. So we'll see if that happens. If none of that happens, he'll be an undrafted free agent. Then he can go anywhere from that point. But there are plenty of quarterback needy teams that they'll probably be looking for Brendan Sorsby to hopefully be on their starting roster. Do I know what Stitch is? like Lilo and Stitch, like Experiment 626 Stitch, or are we talking about a different type of Stitch? Let me know. But anyway, let's talk about college football for dummies though. So I talked last week about offense, and I didn't have a visual to show with it, but I do this time. I have this. There we go. Perfect. Don't know why it's doing it this way, but whatever. This works. Okay. So, yeah. So for the offense, just a real quick little recap. You'll have 11 people that can be on the field. You have the quarterback, you have the running back, you have the two. You can have 2 tight ends. You can even have up to 3, just depending on the offensive formation that you're in. I'm not going to go that deep as far as formations. 1, because I don't know that many, and 2, that's a lot. We're just trying to cover the basics, so that way, if you're watching the game with a loved one, friend, whoever, and you want to have a good time, this is where you can do it. So you have your offensive line, which is the center, the 2 guards here, and then the 2 tackles. And then you have the 2 wide receivers. Again, you can have more wide receivers. Basically, you can only have 11 people on the field. And typically at minimum, you'll have your offensive line. So you'll have these 5 guys almost always on the field. Your quarterback will more than likely always be on the field because you got to have somebody to throw the ball. But then after that, all these wide receivers, these tight ends, these running backs, these can all be switched out. You can have 5 wide receivers. You can have 4 and a tight end. You can have 3 wide receivers, a tight end, and a running back. There's so many different plays and combinations that you can do with this. And so there's a lot you can kind of play with as far as formations go. But just a quick recap as far as the offense goes. Now let's move over to the defense. So I want to preface this by saying that the defense, same as the offense, there's a lot of different packages and styles and formations that you can go into and that you can deal with. The biggest is typically the 2 main like base formations, or the foundation of your defense, is a 4-3 or a 3-4. And all that means is 4-3 and 3-4 is how many linebackers and how many defensive linemen you have on the field at the time. So this first one here is a 4-3. So basically that means you have 4 defensive linemen. Typically it's 2 defensive ends, 2 defensive tackles, 3 linebackers, and then you have 4 what they consider all defensive backs. Technically they're defensive backs and safeties, but usually they're kind of all looped together in one. Even though positionally they do play a little bit of a different style. But when you watch them on the field, they kind of all do the same thing. But the defensive end here, so the guy at the top and the guy at the bottom, if we're looking on the offensive page, this would be on the other side of it. So the 2 defensive end here, their job, or they're also known as pass rushers. Technically, all 4 of these guys are typically considered pass rushers. The defensive end, their job is to go after the quarterback, or technically whoever has the ball when it's snapped. And if you remember from the offensive side, when I say snapped, I meant the center, the guy here, right in the very middle, he hands the ball to the quarterback, and then the quarterback either hands it to the running back or throws it, or basically tosses it to one of these players, the wide receiver or tight end, and then it's off to the races from there. The defensive end, their job is to basically go after the guy that has that. That's their only job that they have to do. Now, the defensive tackles, kind of the same thing. So what they want to do is they're also going after whoever has the quarterback. Their job also is, if we look back here on the offense, if the quarterback hands it to the running back and the running back decides to run up here through the middle or tries to run to what they call the outside. So the outside is basically, if you see where the tight end and the wide receiver are here, this is the outside of what they call the tackles. So think of this as kind of like a line in the sand. Like, you're protected from here, but you need to get around them in order to move the ball forward to try to score. And so you can either try to run through them, and what happens is if these guys can block well enough, they make what they call a hole. Um, so let's say, this guard here is able to move, um, and they're able to do this, and this center is able to do this. And so now this running back has a clear lane to run basically straight up the middle, and either, gain some additional yards, or they're going to run into the next part of the defense, which is the linebackers. Now, the linebackers, they have two jobs essentially. Now, the linebackers can do one of two things. The linebackers can either rush the quarterback. So if you're able to see it here on screen, cool. If not, I can try to explain this as best as I can. So if you have your 4 defensive linemen, like I said, think of it kind of like a line in the sand, and they're trying to go after your quarterback or your running back, whoever has the ball. Your linebackers can do one of two things. If they're doing what's called a blitz, these guys, at least one or two, sometimes even all three, these linebackers are all going to run with these defensive ends and defensive tackles against the offensive line or around them to try to go after the quarterback or whoever has the ball at the time. So that's why they're called pass rushing. Blitzing is basically all 7 of these guys run after the quarterback at the exact same time. And technically, some blitzes can have even some of these defensive back guys or cornerbacks or safeties also blitzing with them. Just depends on kind of the versatility, what down it is as far as where they're at, and also depends on where they're at on the field. Also depends on how good of a quarterback they think that they're facing or not facing. But basically, these linebackers can rush the passer, or they can do what's called dropping back into coverage. And this is where things might get a little bit confusing. So there's so you have a base 4-3 defense or a base 3-4 defense. Obviously, there's a ton of different what they call defensive packages, or basically different numbers of personnel of different positions that can come on and do different things at different times, and it's all for different reasons, and it's to match whatever the offense has. Okay, and that's where it kind of almost gets into the realm of like intermediate to expert of, if they have like 3 wide receivers, maybe you don't want to have a linebacker here. Maybe you want to have another defensive back to help cover that other wide receiver. And so that way you have 4, 2, and then 5 back here, if that makes sense. And so the linebackers can drop into what they call man coverage or zone coverage. And the best way I can say this is, think of man coverage like if you're on the offense and I'm on the defense, and you catch and the quarterback hikes the ball and you start running. Let's say you're just running in a straight line. We're here at the 50. Let's say you're just running straight up the field, trying to get to the end zone, trying to get open to where your quarterback can throw to you. If we're in man coverage, my job, whether I'm a linebacker or defensive back or whoever, if we're in man, my job is to follow you from the 50 all the way to the end zone, or wherever you decide to stop at. That's where I'm supposed to go with you. And there's like 4 things that can primarily happen with this. Is you throw the ball, the quarterback throws the ball to you. If you go up and catch it, and then I tackle you, that can happen. You go up, catch the ball, I tackle you, and you lose the ball. That can be considered either a fumble or an incomplete pass, depending on, and again, this is where things get a little bit weird. If you catch the ball, basically your both feet touch inbounds, and then you start to move, or you take a couple of steps, what they call a football move, and I knock the ball out, that's considered a fumble. If you jump up, catch it, your feet come down inbounds, but then I immediately hit the ball out, depending on the ref, depending on the situation, that can be considered an incomplete pass because you never got the chance, basically, after catching it, to run and make a move afterwards. So that's the other thing that it could be considered. But again, that's more kind of like an intermediate / expert way of breaking it down. So that's another thing that can happen. Now, let's say you and I are both running, quarterback throws, and we both jump up for it, and I knock the ball away from you. That's called a pass breakup. So basically, think of it kind of like breaking up with your boyfriend. Like, nope, not happening. Um, or I have the opportunity to catch the ball as the defensive guy. And if I catch the ball, then I have the opportunity, if I'm able, I can then try to run it back into the end zone to score a touchdown for my own team. And then that's what's called a pick six. And think of it as quarterback throws the ball in the air. I pick it out of the air, kind of like you're picking an apple from a tree. And then I run it back for a touchdown, which is 6 points prior to them kicking the extra point. That's more of a special teams thing. But if I'm able to pick it off and then run it back, that's why they call it a pick six. So that's the man coverage. Again, linebackers and defensive backs technically can both do this. But technically anybody on the defense can do can do zone or can do man coverage. Zone coverage is where it gets a little bit weird, and I'm going to be kind of generic with this as much as I can, only because everybody kind of looks at this in a different way. Zone coverage. So typically there's anywhere between, I believe, 9 and 12 zones on the field. And think of zones kind of like, kind of the analogy I think of is, you say you're at your house and you're in the driveway, right? You're in the middle of your driveway. Somebody pulls up in a car, they get out and they're like, I'm going to go to your front door. You're like, no, not going to my front door. Zone coverage is basically you're kind of there, you're moving a little bit, you're maybe moving a little bit back to try to see where they're going to go. And then you can, counter them early to be able to catch them sooner. And basically your zone that you're protecting is the driveway in your house or porch behind you. That's what you're protecting. So basically if they try, you have that area that you're going to cover. Now, typically these zones can be a pretty decent size, but also the idea is you're supposed to be athletic enough. You're supposed to be good and versatile enough that you can stop them from being able to do that. And kind of the same thing. Any player here can do that. When you, on an actual football field, when you look at it, you typically don't want your big guys like your defensive ends and defensive tackles here doing that. Typically your linebackers, a little bit smaller, a little bit more versatile, a little bit faster. They can play zone. A lot of your defensive backs or safeties here will play zone. But they can also play man too. But that's usually kind of the two biggest things is it a man coverage? Is it zone coverage? And some people have their favorites. Some have ones that they don't like. And again, each defensive package also kind of comes with different things that they like to do. Sometimes it's even a combination of two. Now, luckily for you, if you're a beginner and you're just kind of wanting to learn the basics, you don't have to memorize all that. You may not even be able to see it from the field. Even as somebody who loves college football as much as I do, if I'm sitting there looking at the snap, I can't tell you if they're in man or zone coverage. Because again, these coordinators, they like to disguise stuff, and I don't watch film enough to be able to really tell you, oh yeah, this is what they're in. And so the other formation that I told you about, so we had 4-3, which is this. Now we have 3-4. This is where you have 3 defensive linemen, typically still 2 defensive ends. Technically, the guy here in the middle can be considered a defensive tackle. He can also be considered a nose tackle. If you hear that, again, kind of the same thing, same idea. Trying to pass rush the quarterback, trying to stuff the run on the inside. And then basically you have a little bit more versatility and flexibility because you now have 4 linebackers instead of 3. But the way some of them use it, they kind of use the same personnel almost with like a different package. So say you could actually have like a linebacker here rushing with these guys to go after the quarterback, and then you have the 3 still doing their thing as far as dropping back in man coverage, zone coverage, etc. So it all just kind of depends on your coordinator, what they like, what your team likes, what they're kind of looking for, and a lot of it's also up to your head coach. What is your head coach like? What do they like to run? I know it's probably not a good comparison. I know when I played a lot of early Maddens, I liked the 3-4 defense just because I liked some of the players. That was when the Cowboys had like DeMarcus Ware and they would run a 3-4 defense. I liked having DeMarcus Ware as a linebacker down here on the line, and I just have him pass rush all the time. I wouldn't even have him go back into coverage to try to pick off a ball or block a pass. Like, nope, I just want you going after the quarterback. And then as they changed defensive schemes, and then as I got a little bit older and played, more Madden and more college football, I like a 4-3 defense better. I like having the 3 linebackers here is kind of an option. And then I like having at least 4 guys being able to go after the quarterback, especially if they're, they have a high enough motor, if they're, versatile and athletic enough. I like having a 4-3 personally. But again, it's to each their own, each their preference. And there's so many other packages that, so many other things that you can drop into. Again, for a beginner, a couple other things you might hear. One's called nickel. Nickel is typically one of these linebackers here is removed, and then you have that's weird. One of these linebackers here is removed, and then you replace them with another defensive back, and that's what's called nickel, because now you have 5 defensive backs back here to try and stop somebody from being able to throw against you, whatever, especially if they think it's going to be a passing down kind of thing. You can stop that. The other one is called dime. Dime, kind of the same concept. That's more you get rid of another linebacker, then you have another defensive back. And so then you have 6 defensive backs, and you have basically 4 defensive linemen, and you can even go farther and farther beyond in that. So there's a lot you can dive into, and I'm not going to try to dive into all the specifics because, again, I don't know them into. This is just supposed to be for beginners. You just need to learn the basics to be able to help get through a game. So unfortunately, that's all the visual presentations I have as far as defense and whatnot goes. The other part is special teams. Now, special teams is a little bit different. There is essentially 3 things for special teams that you need to remember when it comes to both college and professional football. Special teams, if let's say it's on 4th down and the announcer says, oh, they're going to have to punt here, and you're going to see kind of this weird formation, and you're going to see a guy all the way in the back. He's just going to be kind of by himself on both sides. Okay. It's because they kind of mirror each other. If you have the ball and you're punting, you're going to have your punter out there. He's going to take the ball. He's just going to kick it straight up in the air as far as he can. And then on the other side, if you're receiving the kick, you have a return man. Now, the return man has one of 2 options with that. He can catch the ball, and then he can try to run it and try to return that ball for a score. That's what they call a kick 6. Or what happens usually a lot of times is the punt goes up in the air. The other team, the team that's kicking, will run down there, and their job is to try to stop him from advancing the ball forward. Now, after he catches the ball, they can knock the ball out. That's a fumble. If he basically messes up the catch, if he tries to catch it and it falls out, that's what's called a muffed punt. Basically, he screwed up. And if he doesn't recover that ball, or if his team doesn't recover that ball, whoever kicks it can, and then everything basically restarts over. The team that kicks it gets the ball back. They get a whole new set of first downs, and then they could potentially try to score again. So you'll see that a lot of times that can be a whole entire momentum shift for the team if they do that, and if that's able to be successful. So punting and receiving is the first thing. The second thing is kicking. Okay. And technically punting is kicking, but you'll see what I mean. So there's 2 forms of kicking that they also do. One is the kick off. Okay. So that's typically when the game first starts, right? And they're like, oh, we're 10 minutes to kick off. Everybody all lined up. And then on the other side, you've got a whole bunch of guys all lined up, ready to catch the ball. And the same thing, try to run it back. And if they can run it back, that's 6 points. It's a touchdown if they're able to get it and cross the end zone. So typically with a kick, because this is actually changed professionally and collegiately, I'll kind of tell you the difference. With college, they do it with what's considered the old kicking way. The guy runs up, he kicks the ball. Everybody on the kicking team runs to the opposite end of the field to try to stop the guy who's catching it and trying to run it. Now, in the NFL, they changed the rule last year. So basically, the guy kicks it, and then nobody else on the kicking team can move until the other team basically catches the ball and then starts to run it. When he finally advances, then they can run, and it's kind of like the old system. It's a little bit different. It's supposed to help with some more of the kick returns. It's supposed to make the kicking return a little bit more interesting, because if your significant other or loved one has watched football for a long time, kicking was not always the most exciting thing. A little fun history fact: Devin Hester, for more recent fans, is a great kick returner, a great punt returner. You want to be you wanted to watch out if you kick the ball to him, because he probably would return it for a score, and he did that a lot throughout his career. So that's where there's a little bit of a difference. The other thing kicking does, like kind of how I mentioned, with what's called a point after, or a PAT, which stands for point after touchdown. That happens no matter how you score a touchdown. If you run the ball into the end zone, if you throw the ball into the end zone for a touchdown, if you get a defensive pick six, if you return a kick all the way back, you have what's called a point after touchdown. And you'll have all your guys line up. Typically, it's a lot of your offensive linemen, some tight ends, maybe some of your backup guys. They all line up. You have two guys. You have your kicker, kind of lines up, and he does this like little two-step spacing to angle himself. The punter will take the ball and hold it or snap it. He holds it, and then the kicker tries to kick the ball through the uprights. Okay. If he gets it through the uprights, that's 1 point. After a touchdown. Now, let's say they didn't score a touchdown. Let's say and this is also where it gets a little bit weird. Once you cross the 50-yard line, you have a few different options. If you just cross the 50, let's say you're like the 49 or 48 of your opponent's territory, you can kick a field goal. It's a really long field goal. It's like 60+ yard field goal. So you can. It's just usually not recommended that you do that. But there's a lot of kickers that have gotten better. They've gotten more accurate. They have bigger legs. They still try, and some of them have succeeded. But let's say you're at like the 35-yard line, and it's like 4th and 7, and you're at your opponent's 35-yard line. It's like, you know what? We're going to kick a field goal. Now, a field goal, same exact formation setup as what you would do for a point after touchdown or a PAT. It's just if they make the ball through the upright, it's 3 points instead of 1. So that's another thing that a lot of teams will try to do to score. And again, you've probably seen that. Now, there's some games and contests, they only kick field goals, and it's not as fun or as cool. Some, they don't do anything, and it's even worse. Some, that's all they're able to do is kick field goals, and the other team is scoring touchdowns. All depends on the team, the people, how the game goes, etc. That's just the competition. That's just what it is. Now, there is one other thing that can happen with it's a special teams and it's an offense. So this is what's interesting about special teams. Special teams is one of the few times where special teams truly incorporates guys on the offense and the defensive side of the ball at the same time. Mostly during kickoffs, some punt returns, you'll have offensive guys with defensive guys. Some guys are just purely special teams guys, so they don't really see any action other than that. Maybe like sporadically, they'll have some time or playing time on the field. Like some wide receivers are really good at returning, like Devin Hester. He wasn't a great actual wide receiver, but he was great on special teams returning the ball. If it was kicked to him, he was great at it. Otherwise, not so much. You can do what is also called a 2-point conversion. Now, a lot of times they'll bring the offense back for this, but you can still do it with your kicking team, your kicking formation. So let's say you score a touchdown, and touchdown puts you down by 2 points. You score your 6, and for ease of math, let's say the other team has 14. After the touchdown, you have 12, right? So now if you're the head coach and you're sitting there, you're watching, it's like, okay, we have like 2 minutes left and we need to at least tie the game to send it into overtime. Okay, we can either try to trick them with a trick play and act like we're going to go for the extra point and, fake it. And then if we can get the ball to cross the goal line without kicking it, kind of the same as treat it just like a touchdown. If you can get a 2-point conversion of crossing the ball over the goal line, then you get 2 points. And so you go from 14-12 to 14-14. Now you're tied, and now the game can continue on into overtime, and hopefully you can stop the other team from scoring with your defense. Or if you get the ball back, you can then try to score again yourself, either by a field goal or by a touchdown. Oh, there is one other thing I did forget to mention with the defense. So I did mention the defense can get touchdowns via interceptions for returns. They can get fumbles. So basically, when the quarterback has the ball, if the defense runs and hits him and the ball comes out before he throws it, that's called a fumble. Now, once the ball is on the ground, anybody can grab it. The team that has it, if they're able to grab it, hold on to it, they retain possession. If not, and the other team grabs it, they have basically two options. If they grab it and they're immediately tackled, they just gain possession of the ball and then their offense comes on. If they're able to grab it and then they can run and try to score a touchdown, they can get 6 points that way. That's one way your defense can score. Another way is what's called a safety. Okay. So I'll actually bring this back up. It's hopefully kind of give a better idea. It just may kind of look weird. So just kind of imagine with me here. So let's say you're the offense. Actually, I'm going to move all these to back here. Okay. Back here, because this is your end zone, right? If this is your 10, this is your 5, the end zone, this white line right here. And let's say the defense runs and they hit your quarterback and your running back just finally gets handed the ball. Somebody tackles him and he stays here in the end zone that he gets tackled. That's what's called a safety. And a safety in football is worth 2 points. And then once that's done, once the safety's done, they have to kick the ball then to the team that just got the safety. So then they'll punt the ball away, and then the team has an opportunity to score more points, whether it's a field goal, touchdown, etc. So theoretically, if you were to get a safety and then a touchdown, and then you did a 2-point conversion, you could get 10 points all within the span of what they would consider like one drive. Theoretically. Doesn't happen very often, but it can. So yeah, I think that's just about everything I can think of as far as defense and special teams goes. Again, for beginners, for people that, like I said, if you're trying to help learn to understand, maybe help enjoy, help yourself enjoy and learn the game more with the family, friends, loved ones, etc. Definitely check it out. Definitely let me know what you like, what you don't like. Like I said, over the next few episodes, then I'm going to move on to kind of the more fun and cool stuff. I'm going to talk about the history of the conferences, where they kind of came from. I'm going to focus mostly on the Power 4 conferences, which I'll get into who those are, what they are, etc. So if anybody's a fan of the Group of 6 conferences, I apologize. I will, if you really, really want me to, I will potentially do an episode on the Group of 6, kind of explain who they are, and kind of the same thing. I might go after more of the bigger Group of 6 conferences, such as like the American, the technically now the Pac-12 would be considered that, maybe even the MAC. So I potentially will. You just gotta let me know. But appreciate everybody tuning in. Appreciate everybody listening. Hope you enjoyed it. If you like my stuff, I am all on social media. Please check me out. Please like, share, subscribe. Everywhere on social media, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, at Inside the Hoosier Mind. If you like military broadcast radio, if you want to hear other veterans actually tell cool stories, give cool life advice, anything like that, check out Military Broadcast Radio. There's a little QR code right there on the screen, or you can just go to mbradio.us. We have a ton of great veteran show hosts, great veterans that they tell their stories about when they were in. They have other guests that do the same thing. And that's really MB Radio's whole entire thing, is letting veterans' voices be heard, because they have so many cool stories. There's so many cool things veterans get to do and experience with people from all walks of life. And people just want to share that. They just want to talk to people, and hey, that's my biggest thing. If I can help you through something I learned, that would be cool for me. So definitely go and check them out. And if you want great beard care products, if you want to support a local veteran here in the U.S. that he makes all of the stuff and ships it all out here in the U.S., check out Gunfighter Beard Co. Gunfighter Beard Company at gunfighterbeardco.com. He's got a whole bunch of great stuff, great smells. He's got some of his summer scents coming out and whatnot. So he's absolutely great. But appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will see y'all next week.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to Military Broadcast Radio. As we wrap up today's show, we want to remind you that the podcast of today's episode will be available right after we go off the air. So if you missed any part of the show or want to listen again, be sure to check it out. And remember, we're here to support and honor our veterans. Your stories and experiences matter, and we are committed to giving you a platform to share them. That's right. We're here to give our veterans a voice. So don't forget to catch the podcast and stay connected with us. Giving our veterans a voice.